Good afternoon. Matt Lindsay with Macroeconomics. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to speak about three areas that publishers are using publishers working using analytics to grow their business volumes and audience revenue. I'll talk about kind of three examples really quickly in the next 15 minutes and use some case studies. I'll skip over our introduction in the interest of time, but we do work with a number of publishers in Europe. We work with NZZ in Zurich and NRC in Amsterdam, among others. So the first area I'd like to talk about is churn prediction. So as acquiring customers becomes more difficult, what we've often heard is that retention is the new acquisition. So what do we do? How do we predict, and then what do we do with that information once we know who's likely to stop? So when we have a churn model, we use different types of data. We like customer data, specifically what they've done with their subscription. We use complaint history. We use digital engagement. We can look at their behavior and how is it deviating from the current history, and so on. We also can use demographic data. We don't get it from Facebook. Once we have those, some of the variables that we, and I was kidding. One of the variables that we found is very effective in reducing churn is term. So we also can look at their price, their acquisition channel. Some of the things that we found are likely to increase churn are where they came from. So if they came from social media, that's usually an indicator they are likely to churn. This is just the example of people that we predict are likely to churn actually do churn. So predicting churn is actually fairly straightforward, and it's not very difficult to do. The real tricky part is what do you do once you know somebody's going to stop. In the next few minutes, I'll talk about a couple examples. So we tested some different strategies. Here's a gift card case study. So we actually gave a gift card to people that we predicted would churn, and we compared the people that did not. We have a control group versus a target group. And you can see from this slide that 3 months afterwards, the gift card did indeed help save people. However, if you look 9 months later, those people that got the gift card were actually worse off than the people that did not get one. So we also tried greeting cards, so very, very basic, low, not very expensive. And what we found is that greeting cards were very helpful. They actually were both at 5 months and at 9 months, they were found to stop churn or reduce churn relative to a control group that didn't get the card. We also have a value letter, and a value letter is actually a piece from the publisher that talks about what are the pieces of the subscription that create value for the reader. And we found that it's actually did best of all of these. So again, these low-cost initiatives like greeting cards and value letters were very effective. And in fact, we tested these different options, and you can see that the gift card or the merchandise were actually the least effective. So the most expensive premiums or incentives were the ones that had the poorest results. And so you can see that these stop effects are actually better for people that are most likely to churn. So the group 10 there are the most likely to stop, and we indeed were able to have the most effect on those customers. So the other approach I was going to mention today was long-term offers. So this is an area of innovation in newspapers. I think newspapers have a very traditional acquisition model. They've done it this way for decades. And so what are newspapers able to do differently with acquiring their customers? And what we decided in this case, and I'll show a case study here with NRC, we borrowed something from the telecommunications industry. So we looked at how cell phone companies are acquiring subscribers, and we developed some offers that were very similar to those. So key aspects of these offers are that there's a commitment on both sides. The publisher commits to keep the price the same for a number of years. The customer is committing to remain active over that time. So we, instead of going from kind of 3-month, 6-month, 1-year offers, we actually introduced 1, 2, and 3-year offers. And what's interesting is that there's no increased discount for 3 years. It's about a 30 or 40% price discount for all 1, 2, or 3 years. So I'd like to talk about how this worked for NRC. NRC is based in Amsterdam. They have about 250,000 subscribers. They're a business publication. And you can see they have about 360 employees. Only about 14 of them are in marketing. And this is in Dutch, but this is from their webpage. And what you can see here is that they're offering 1, 2, or 3 years at 15 euros a month. And again, the commitment here is that they won't change the price for the length of this subscription. And what we found is when we looked at historical data that the retention rate for customers that had, these are different subscription lengths, so monthly samples had very poor retention, People that had 6 months were that next line there. After about 30 months, there's only about a quarter of them left. You can see annual and 2-year subscriptions both had about 45% retention over 30 months. So what's interesting is that there was a lot of pushback from the sales channels. They said there's no way that we're going to be able to sell these types of offers. And what we found is that these sales actually, the offers actually were well received. They sold about 40,000 starts in 2014, and in 2015 they sold about 50,000. So those are actual numbers of starts. But if you change the metric, if you actually looked at the number of years of subscriptions that were sold, you can see a big difference. In 2014, they actually sold about 34,000. The average term was about 3 or 6 months. In 2015, that number of years sold went to 74,000, and it stayed high in 2016 and went to 77,000. So that metric shows the difference. And if you look at stops, you can see that they had 62,000 stops. So if you recall, they had 34,000 starts and 62,000 stops. So very, obviously print circulation is declining. In 2015, the stops went to 43,000, and then again in 2016, they went to 32,000. So as you can imagine, what's happened in NRC is they're actually growing print circulation. They've actually gone from losing 15,000 per year to growing 12,000 per year. And this is actually a slide that's somewhat old. They've continued to grow. They're about up 20,000 subscriptions now. So again, just an example of how innovation and acquisition can really make a big difference in your number of relationships. And this is the profit margin or the operating margin from their audience revenue group. So you can see they're actually making 43 million euros per year from their audience profit operation, or their circulation operation. So the last topic I'd like to talk about is market-based pricing. This is actually a topic that can be somewhat controversial. We utilize this type of pricing in the United States. We also do it in Canada, in Australia, New Zealand, in some European countries. And so I invite you to keep an open mind when you hear about this. The key is that we actually look at, as other industries differentiate pricing, like airlines and hotels and rental car companies, there's very much a deviation, a movement away from one-size-fits-all pricing. So if you remember from your economics in school, there's a demand curve. And so if we look at what customers are paying today, you can see that there was, in this particular market, there was about, most of the customers were paying the basic rate of 12 euros a week. There's perhaps a slight discount for people that pay by credit card. And then the people on the right there are the people that actually are on a promotional offer and they go right to full price. So if the dotted line you see there is what we actually estimate the demand for this product is. There are people that are actually paying a lot less than they perhaps would be willing to, and there are people that are paying more than they should be, and they cause churn that way. So we did a test. This is actually with the New York Times. So we asked them they have one increase every year. Everybody gets about a 5 to 10% increase, and it goes across the board. All customers are treated exactly the same. So we asked them to take a 5% control group. So we said, don't give these 50,000 subscribers a price increase. Let them continue on their same price. And we predicted what would happen. And indeed, what we found was exactly what we predicted. These are tenure groups. So people on the far right have been active subscribers for 5 years. People on the far left have only been subscribers for less than a year. And so what you see is that the people that did not get a price increase are the lighter colored bars in this example. The people that did get the price increase are on the dark blue bars. So people on the far left, you can see that's actually about a 5% price increase. It caused over 9% of people in their first year to stop. The people on the far right that had been active for over 5 years, it caused less than 0.5%. So an enormously different impact of that price increase on customers just based on how long they had been active. We also looked at digital engagement and have a similar story. We found that the higher engaged customers had far lower stops than the people that were very marginally engaged online. So income and digital engagement are two very important variables to determine what type of price increase you should get. And when we do this, we actually don't use conjoint analysis where you interview customers. What we actually look at are what the historical data. So what have people actually done in the past? We use econometrics to do that. And you can see that what we do is get this distribution from least sensitive to price to the most sensitive. So people on the far left of this chart are likely to take the price increase very well. People on the far right are more likely to stop. And instead of everybody getting one price, which in this case perhaps would be, say, 10 or 15%, we actually give a higher price increase to people that can tolerate the price increase, and we give less to people that are not able to pay that much. We also use target and control groups, and this is an example of a report that we often produce that shows how these, so it's a very test-driven process. So a quick case study, this is actually with the LA Times. We started working with them in 2010, and you can see that most customers were paying 2 or 3 prices. Their full price was about $6 a week. They had people that they were acquiring at $2 and $3. In 2011, we had started moving people, and you can see we had started to raise that top rate, and you can see that sloped line is what we believe the demand curve was. So as we went over time, you can see in 2012, we had moved more people up. In 2013, we had raised the top price to $10, and again, the average price is going up. So if I go back a slide, you can see it started at $4.26 a week. By the time we had gotten to 2013, it was $6. By the time we got to 2015, you could see it was $5.38, and by the time we were in 2017, it was $6.45. So these slides are all available. I'll be happy to share these slides with you, but this is an example of how using different types of pricing, you can actually introduce, you can grow your revenue quite a bit without upsetting your volumes. So that is a very brief summary of the types of ways we are using analytics. I will be available back over there to ask any questions that you may have or answer any questions. Some of my colleagues are here. Sebastian Gehr is here. He's actually German, and Bob is an American like me. He speaks no German, so I'll warn you about that. Anyways, just very happy to be here. This is a copy of our book. It is coming out in German in September, and we are having a conference in Amsterdam in association with INMA. So if you're happy to see you there in September. Thank you very much. Thank you.
One question?
Yeah.
Okay.